So again, thank you for joining. And my name is Chandra, and I'm excited to host Stephanie. You may have read her Teen Life article, 10 Things to Do on a College Trip, her advice on helping your overscheduled high school student in the Wall Street Journal, or her guidance on writing a college essay in U.S. News and World Report and Money Magazine. 10 years ago, Stephanie Klein-Wassink turned her passion for helping students through the admissions process into AdmissionsCheckup. Tonight, Stephanie draws on her extensive admissions experience at Northwestern University's Kellogg School and 2 decades as a college consultant to address your questions and turn deferred or waitlisted into admitted. Stephanie?
Thank you, Chandra. That's wonderful. So I'm guessing that many of you are feeling like being deferred or waitlisted, and I'm going to use those terms actually interchangeably because they're very similar, is worse than being denied. And so that's really the first poll question. So please feel free to fill out the poll, and then we'll refer to the poll intermittently as we talk. I know you're frustrated. I know that you've worked hard, and I know that you have taken tests and you've written essays and you've gotten good grades and you've volunteered and you've done all of these fabulous things. And this is a really frustrating experience to go through. So I know how you feel. In this webinar, what we're going to discuss is first, wait, what happened? And then why? And then why to you? Because there are lots of reasons why colleges defer and waitlist. And then once we get to why, what should you do? So what are your action steps? Throughout the webinar, because I think it's important that you be able to ask your questions, and there are probably really specific questions that you have, I'm going to stop. And not only are we going to share a poll answer, an answer to one of the poll questions, but I also want to take questions. So please feel free to put them in the Q&A, or if you don't see the Q&A, the chat, whichever. Chandra's going to be so kind as to feed the questions to me as I pause for questions. So let's start with really, what are deferrals and what are waitlists? And really, to be in their most basic form, a deferral is changing an early action or early decision notification from mid-December to the spring. And regular decision or wait lists is the same with regular decision, except it moves a regular decision notification from the early spring to the summer, and sometimes the late summer. Both, however, are frustrating. One thing that I would love to tell you, because misery loves company, is that you are not alone. So many students have had to deal with deferrals over the years. And also, one of the things that you can probably see from this this chart is that it's difficult to know how many students were deferred. It's difficult to know what percentage of students were deferred from year to year. All we know is that colleges defer, and the rate of deferral is going down. I was actually at a presentation about a year ago, and it was with a group of college consultants, and one of the colleges in the room, I think it was the University of Richmond, noted that they were starting to defer less or fewer students. And the whole room erupted in applause because deferrals are really difficult to manage. And what you guys all know as our wait lists, and you all know firsthand because you're on this call. So all of you, if you were deferred, you got a notification from the college that deferred you. Unfortunately, those notifications are vague at best, but there are a few, I don't know, gems that you can glean from the notifications. Things like, we're going to compare you to the regular decision pool, which some of you may have seen in your notifications, or 9 billion people applied, tells you kind of what they're experiencing in their office, or don't call us, we'll call you, also kind of tells you that 9 billion people applied. And then, send us an update letter, right? So that's also something that you might have seen in the letter that came, your deferral notification, which came from the admissions office. I would love to hear if anyone had any other tidbit added to their deferral letter. Those are the kind of the 4 most popular ones that you see. If you do have another tidbit that you want to share, feel free to put it into the Q&A or the chat. All right, so I'm going to stop for a second, and I'm going to see if there are any questions for me, Chandra. If you have any questions for me, please share.
Yes. So, am I released from the binding commitment of ED if I get a deferral letter?
You are. You are no longer bound to commit to the school, even if they offer you a place in their freshman class. You can apply to another school, ED2, or you can attend an RD school. So you are unbound from that commitment, so to speak. And just with respect to, I'm going to end this poll. I think I'm hoping that everyone was able to participate. Most people are saying here, at least 66% of respondents are saying, in answering the question, is being deferred or waitlisted worse than being denied? Everyone is saying, yeah, it's pretty much worse than being denied. So I've heard that before, and I feel for you guys. So let's keep going, and we'll talk a little bit more about your deferral or your wait list. Okay, so what's happening? Everybody's heard this line, it's not you, it's me. And if you think of that in terms of the college that you applied to, something's happening internally. It could be that something's happening internally anyway, for which they need to slow the process. I used the example a few moments ago of 9 billion students applied, and we have to work through all these applications. So slowing the process is one of the things that being deferred or waitlisted does. It allows probably an understaffed staffed admissions office to really go through each file and find the gems in the file. Also, admissions work is hard. It's not paid well, and there is a fair amount of employee attrition. So that can happen as well, further slowing the process. Being overwhelmed with applications definitely could be a part of your deferral. It could also be that they have too many or too few of a specific region or pool that they are trying to bring into the school. So when I was in admissions, I remember my boss coming into my office and saying, we need more California. So those kinds of things can be definitely part of the reason why someone is deferred. All of those fall under the umbrella of institutional priorities. And from an applicant's perspective, you really don't think about the idea that a university or a college is a business, that it has to keep lights on, that it includes there are new majors that a college might introduce, and that it has to find students for those majors. So housing could be an institutional priority. The fact that there aren't enough houses or dorms for freshmen, or the new musical theater department / major could definitely, that needs to be filled, and that could be an institutional priority. Some of you know that universities have campuses all over the world. So the Paris campus or the Dubai campus, and those campuses need to be filled as well. So filling those campuses and making sure that there are students who are able to actually participate on those campuses definitely makes an institutional, stands out as an institutional priority. And then one institutional priority that you may or may not be aware of is satellite campuses. So for the University of Connecticut at Storrs, that's the main campus, but there's satellite campuses such as the one in Stamford, Connecticut. So if there are not enough students for the satellite campus, that's a problem for the university. Now, note that some of you may get, after being deferred, offers of admission that include starting at a satellite campus, or would you be willing to take, the first semester at a satellite campus in a different country, et cetera. So those kinds of things are things that you might see as you negotiate this process. So I want to stop again and see if there are any questions, because the institutional priorities are pretty big.
So the question was, what percentage of deferred students ultimately get accepted? You showed a few universities. Are all of them the same?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So that's a tough question to answer, and statistics that are not made readily available to the applicant pool. Sometimes universities will divulge, how many ED or EA applicants they defer, but they rarely divulge how many they accepted after the deferral. You can find, and I will talk more about in just a few minutes, how many students get in after being waitlisted. So there's definitely more information on that, but you may not know what the percentage of admit after deferral is. It's just not something that universities divulge. So sorry to say that. But I will tell you for the second question, which is true or false, I will learn with certainty why I was deferred, and 50-50 split on that. And the answer is false. For most students, you will not ever know why you were deferred. So, which is a little frustrating. So piecing it together is part of this call. And that's really what we're trying to do tonight. We're trying to give you ways to piece it together. And in terms of piecing it together, it could be an academic trend that they're concerned about in your transcript, or a concern about your curriculum, the level of courses that you take, or even the school that you come from, whether or not you demonstrated interest. Schools love to protect their yield. So whether or not they see leadership, initiative, team skill, interpersonal skill in your background and in your extracurriculars, whether you're a legacy, believe it or not, can also lead to a deferral instead of a deny in some respects. It's called a courtesy deferral. And then taking the time to compare you to other people who apply from your high school. So that, again, is one of the pools that you'll compete in. Finally, recommendations. Ultimately, and what we'd hope is that recommendations are generally positive, but a negative recommendation or a concern about a recommendation could also lead to a deferral. I want to make sure that you understand what colleges are trying to do and what their job is. And it's to bring students who will succeed academically to their campuses. And that sounds actually like, oh, duh, everybody knows that. But the reality is that bringing students who will succeed academically keeps the light on for the universities, right? You could do phenomenally well in all of your extracurricular activities in college, but that will not mean that you'll stay and become a member of the sophomore class, right? So it's those students who can do well academically who will stay and become sophomores, who keep the lights on, right? The tuition payments, et cetera. So they want students also, however, who will teach other students beyond the classroom. So diverse backgrounds, diverse regions, male, and we'll talk about the reason why I said male, cisgendered male as well. And then students who have demonstrated interest, who they feel will come to the school if they're admitted. So here's just another representation of students who are competing in pools, the different pools that they compete in, and then ultimately what the colleges want to see is that the students will rise to the top of these pools, right? The first generation pool, the female pool, the Midwest pool, et cetera. Any questions?
Oh, yes, we have one. Should I apply a second early decision to the school that I was deferred at?
You cannot apply ED2 to your deferred school. So an ED2 application, which would presumably, you'd apply around January 1st, it must be to a different school. And that makes sense. You would not want to double down at the same school that you've already applied to. But an ED2 application to another school would be binding. So that's important to know. And with respect to the survey question, which is which of the following is not an institutional priority for which a college or university defers students? And half of respondents got that sunny weather is not an institutional priority. So good job getting that for those of you who got it. Okay, other ways to get to understand why you were deferred. And there are three that I think are important ways to give you insights into what's happening with the rest of the applicant pool. You're not going to get exact information, but looking historically at what happened to, for example, the University of Michigan might give you insight into what's happening the year that you're applying. So the first is the common data set. Next is AdmissionsCheckup, and the second is an organization called the National Association of College Admissions Counseling that all colleges belong to. They do a survey, and that survey is very helpful with respect to helping students figure out why they were, what colleges feel is most important. So I'm going to look first at the common data set. The common data set is really the data that all four-year colleges and universities offer to the US government. It's very, very specific. So each of the line items in the common data set is a specific number. And I'm going to give you some examples of that in a second. But they want to be able to take, say, the University of Michigan and its common data set and compare it to, say, Colby College's common data set and make the numbers kind of apples to apples. So it's very specific. Some schools divulge more data than others. So I'm going to actually share data from the University of Michigan common data set. And you'll just have to note that if you're looking for another school's common data set, you will not get the same amount of information. And it's also important to note, how do you find the common data set from a school? You just open a browser and you type the words common data set, Vanderbilt University, or common data set, University of Denver. And that's how you bring the common data set up. So let's take a look at some of the data in the common data set. And this is for students who are currently at the University of Michigan. They were freshmen in the fall of 2022. That's when they matriculated to the University of Michigan, and they will graduate from the University of Michigan in the spring of 2026. So they're currently there. When you look at data at the University of Michigan, what you first see is the total men who applied for first-time, first-year admission. And that number is 42,000, right? And then you look at the total women who applied for first-time, first-year admission. So this is really for the freshman class, right? 42,283. So slightly more women than men. And then when you come down here and you look at the total number, the total men offered first-time, first-year admission, you see that it's 8,480, while 6,434 women were offered admission. So even though the numbers, women are slightly, about 300 applications more to the University of Michigan, they are 30% less with respect to getting offers from the University of Michigan, right? More men than women got offers of admission. Now, if you come down to the next line, which is about enrollment, to the total full-time, first-year men who enrolled, you'll note that only roughly 3,000 men enrolled, while 4,000 women enrolled. So even though the women got fewer offers of admission, more of them enrolled. Now, this is something that you'll see in college after college after college. Colleges gender norm for boys. And that's what these statistics are saying. You'll see that time and time again as you're looking at the common data set of different schools. More women go to college than men, more women graduate from college than men, and that has been true since the mid-1980s. So, in effect, men are an affirmative action class, the last affirmative action class in college admissions. And this is just an example of that. And so could it be that that's one of the reasons why you might have been deferred if you're a woman? Absolutely. Another reason, by looking at what you took in high school, did you take 4 years of the core, 4 years of English, 4 years of math, 4 years of science? Here is what the required course load is for English, for math, for science, etc. But they really recommend, and they really clearly would prefer 4 years of the whole Common Core. And in addition to that 4 years, they would really recommend AP, honors, accelerated classes. So one place to look, and you'll see this actually echoed again in the National Association of College Admissions Counseling survey, one place to look with respect to whether or not you were, or why you were deferred is at your own transcript to see how you compare to the school versus what they're seeing in their applicants. You can also find in the common data set in section C7 what they consider important. Again, academic record, that shouldn't be surprising. Academic GPA, standardized test scores are important. Application essay, recommendations are important. Personal qualities, first generation here is important at the University of Michigan. So definitely something to consider if you are not, or if your attributes or you're not in these very important or important columns, that's something to consider about your deferral. GPA, not surprising. That's just really kind of echoing the rest of what we've already seen. But the average high school GPA for all degree seeking first year, so freshmen students who submitted was 3.9. So you can see that there's a huge advantage to having a higher GPA at Michigan. And the same is true for the testing. So here's the middle 50% SAT, right? 1350 to 1530. And for the ACT, 31 to 34. And then finally, and I think this is really interesting, they don't offer this data for deferrals, but they do offer data for the wait list. So the number of applicants placed on the wait list at the University of Michigan was 21,078. The number of applicants accepting a place on the wait list, 15,076. So 72% roughly. And then from there on, this is actually about 0.5%. They're calling it 1%, but it's actually about 0.5%. This is the number who got in. You will not always find this shared amongst different schools that, that put their data out there on the common data set. Some offer more data than others. But I think what's important to know from this analysis is, as a deferred student, if you are asked to share or to send an update letter, a lot of people will not send the update letter. The update letter is almost like or akin to accepting a place in the waiting list. So if you send an update letter, you are sending a signal that you are still interested in whatever school deferred you. All right, so let's stop for a second and look at another survey and answer any questions. First, we'll answer questions.
So with the update letter, does that lock you in to the early decision? So if you send it, then you're locked in, or?
No, you still are not bound. You're no longer bound but the update letter does give an update to the school, and it can really conveys to the school that you're still interested, that even though you've been deferred, maybe you didn't apply to another school, ED2, for example, and but they won't know, and they can't stop you from applying to another school, ED2. The update letter is really just keeping your irons in the fire and making them know that you're still interested in attending the school.
We have one other question.
Yep.
Is there any difference to send the update letter right away versus waiting closer to the update letter deadline?
Well, I would argue that when you send the update letter, you want to send, there are a few rules, and you probably want to send more than one update letter. The rules are keep it short. The reason to keep it short is if you've ever taken a class like AP US History or AP Lang, and you've gotten saturated with reading and you now can only skim for some reason because that's all your eyes will do, that is a lot like being an admissions officer. So bullet point any accomplishments that you can tack on to, what happened between November and December, right? And send that update letter, and then perhaps send another one in another month, and then another one in another month. Keep them very short, make sure that you note that the school to which you're applying is still a top choice school for you and you really would like to attend, and then update them if you've, been inducted into the National Honor Society, or you've won the book award, or you're the Scholar Athlete of the Month. So all of those types of accomplishments should go in that update letter, and more often than not, you're allowed to send more than one update letter. Just keep them short and keep them sweet. Okay. And then for the next survey question, which was true or false, no one ever gets admitted after being deferred or waitlisted. And everyone answered false to that. So that's true. People do get admitted after being deferred or waitlisted. All right, so let's keep going. Another way that you can assess what to put in that update letter, because if it is your application, and if there is something about your application that perhaps left the admissions committee wanting, you need to assess and find out what it is. I recommend AdmissionsCheckup to help you do that. It's a group of former admissions officers from really prestigious schools, including Princeton and Brown and Colby, NYU, and a lot of other schools. And basically, what they will do is, once you send them your application, a Common App, your transcript, testing if you have it, your long essay, supplemental essays if they're required by the school, they will actually critique your application as they critiqued applications when they were on admissions committees. They will give you actionable feedback, a variety of edits, if there are some, if that's warranted in your application. And most important, they won't be nice. So they won't be like your English teacher or your mom or your aunt. They will be very direct about your opportunity at XYZ school. And then they'll offer you advice for your deferral letter. So what do you add to a letter, to an update letter, to assuage any concern that the admissions committee could have? I do have to underscore that, you will not know why you were deferred, and this is the opinion of former admissions officers who've worked in the admissions, committees, but we can't guarantee you're admitted after you're deferred either. So that's an important thing to note. The turnaround on AdmissionsCheckup is 24 to 72 business hours, and the fee is $395, $495, or $595, depending on how many former admissions officers you want to read your application file. So that's another way to get information about your application, and then to create and craft a deferral letter, or more than one, that actually assuages any concerns that the admissions committee might have about your application. So I'm going to stop again and ask if there are any questions.
Yes. So should the update letter include grades and transcripts, even though the university stated not to send grades?
So if
This
the,
is the update.
yep, so if the update letter, if the university stated don't send grades, then follow the rules of the university, because they're being very specific about what they do and what they don't want. And universities usually ask for a you know, mid-year report. They get some of your grades from the school directly. So, but what I would say is, let's suppose you did really well and you made the high honor roll. I would note that. So I would make that one of the bullet points. So even though you're not sending your grades, you're actually being very clear about how well you're doing with your 17 AP classes.
Great. Is there any way you can make your chance of getting accepted after deferral stronger?
Yeah, so first, the update letters are helpful, right? It's clear that if you're sending a couple of update letters and if you're really adding leadership and initiative and, strong academic performance as bullet points in your update letters, and I would have at least 3 bullet points per update letter. You can also note that you would attend even, that you are still that XYZ school is still your first choice school, and that you will attend if offered a position in the school, which helps them get a sense of yield, whether or not you would attend. So those are really some of the things that you can do. You could also, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, you can visit the school again, do an information session. After the information session, and I'll talk about this again, as people file out to go to their tour guides, you can approach the admissions officer and say, hi, my name is Jenny, and I am a deferred student. And I'm just kind of curious about the process. You have to, however, be super respectful, right? That's part of the job. And you're getting, in some respects, an unofficial interview, an unofficial FaceTime with an admissions officer who will likely not be, in your region, but will offer comments to your file about a nice conversation, the fact that you revisited. Clearly you're demonstrating interest and you're really focused on attending Penn State. Does that make sense? Hoping it does. All right, so I will give one more. All right, so the next survey question is, true or false, some colleges offer courtesy deferrals to the children of their alumni, and everyone says false. It's actually true. So sometimes you can get a courtesy deferral in admissions, but I think that it actually is probably worse to get a courtesy deferral and still be in limbo than it is just to get denied. But as universities, and a lot of you have already heard this, I'm sure, as they battle with the whole legacy issue, right? Amherst, for example, has said that it's no longer going to honor legacies going forward. But as universities battle with this issue of legacy, one of the things they have done is given some alumni kids like courtesy deferrals. So I think it would, I mean, just, from my own perspective, I think that would be worse to have a courtesy deferral than it would be to just be denied. I think I'd rather know that I'm not going to get in. So that's the survey question. All right, so I'll keep on going. And we'll take questions again in another second. I talked about the common data set, and to type in common data set, University of Michigan, or common data set, Amherst, et cetera, Amherst College, et cetera, to get the common data set for your university. And I talked about admissions checkup. Another way to just check what you're thinking about your application and what could have been the issue with respect to your deferral is the National Association of College Admissions Counseling Survey. This survey is done every year, and every year the results are pretty much the same. And it really reinforces what you saw in the common data set. So in this survey, they survey admissions officers from four-year colleges, and they ask them pretty much the same question every year. As you can see, it goes back to 2012. It actually goes back earlier than that, but I thought that this would be a good representation. So what are the most important things with respect to college admissions? What do you care about when you're looking at a student's file? Most important thing, high school grades in college prep courses. So that means honors and AP. And that's the highest thing by far. The next highest thing, except for 2017, interestingly enough, but I think that the next highest thing is total high school grades, all courses. So a D in gym, for example, would stand out like a sore thumb and could be a problem, even though it's not an academic subject, right? Strength of high school curriculum. So how strong is your high school academically, and are you taking rigorous courses? So are you challenging yourself? And then as you can see, the numbers drop off precipitously with writing, students' interest in attending. So that's demonstrated interest. Some schools care about it, some schools don't. Counselor recommendation, teacher recommendation, extracurriculars, et cetera. And so the numbers fall dramatically. So again, how you've done, what your curriculum is, how well they know your high school and trust your high school's curriculum, all very important. All right, questions again.
Two questions.
Yep.
Will they get a copy of the recording?
We will post a copy of the recording on our Facebook page. And I'm glad that you're liking the webinar.
The second question is, should I submit a new application if I'm deferred?
No. So the answer definitely is no. Update letter, listen to what the universities told you to do in their note, in the deferral note. Really follow that advice, because that's really what they want you to do. But sending an update letter is telling the university, I'm still in, even if you're not. So even if you do decide to apply ED2 someplace, or even if you, because there is a chance that if you don't get admitted to your ED2 and you applied ED1 and got deferred, you could still be admitted. So so I would still do the update letter, and I would still run at the school at which you were deferred. But then I would also, and you'll see this in just a couple of seconds, but I would still apply to other schools for sure. And we'll talk about that more in a second. All right, I think I did not answer this one, give a survey question yet. So true or false, sending a lot of letters of recommendation will help me get in after being deferred or waitlisted. False. Do not send a lot of recommendation letters. You can send one extra recommendation letter perhaps, but I was at Vanderbilt University. This is a couple of years ago, and I was in their information session, and they noted that one student who was really interested in going to Vanderbilt sent 41 recommendation letters. He did not get in. So overdoing the recommendation letter is not a great strategy. We can all find people to say really good things about us. That's not what they're looking for.
So a follow-up question on that. So should we add an additional letter of recommendation from a non-teacher with a deferral letter?
You could absolutely have that letter sent separately from your update letter. So the teacher could send it, via snail mail or via email if you give her the email of your regional rep. Absolutely. But I would do one, not 41 for sure, and make sure that that person really knows you well. So you do not want to, you don't want, a friend of a friend of a friend sending, a letter of recommendation, someone who doesn't know you well. It just falls flat. Someone who knows you well, like a coach who really just knows how hard you work, or a dance teacher or someone who knows you for years and knows you well, that's the person to choose.
So just to clarify, a non-teacher, like the coach, extracurricular, coach or teacher that's not academic would be good.
That's actually fine.
Okay.
But limit it to one. Letter of recommendations, if you looked at the NACYAC survey that I just showed you, and I'm going to see if I can go back to it. So recommendations were really, so counselor recommendations are relatively low. But you know what? If you have one recommendation that you want to send, why not? I would not send more than one. Okay, so I'll keep going, and I'll stop for questions in a second. One more time. So what should I do? So consider your deferral or your wait list again. You're not going to get certainty about why you were deferred or waitlisted. So just become aware of that you're not going to have certainty about this. You have to kind of be a little bit of a sleuth and try to figure out what you think are the weakest parts of your application. And you have to, at the same time, remember, the fact that there are not enough dorms, or there's a program in Paris, or musical theater program that's new. So sometimes it may not even be you, right? Think about the common data set and the NACYAC survey information. What's super important to colleges? That definitely you have to consider. And then once you've assessed possible reasons, you're going to, try to kind of find things that offset what you think could be the reasons. You could ask a former admissions officer to read your application, as I've already pointed out, and tell you what they think you need to stress in your update letter. So that hopefully, if there is something in your application, you can kind of balance it out with your update letters. But create a game plan for how you're going to treat this. Are you going to revisit the campus? What do you want in your update letters? Raise your hand in your classroom setting so that you do show leadership and initiative, and then, report that you've, and I like to joke that you've crossed the street by yourself, put it in an update letter. So, but the things that you do and the things that have happened since you submitted your application to schools, and if, or to this school, could definitely go in an update letter. As a matter of fact, some would argue that you could even update the schools that you're still waiting to hear from, if there are RD schools that you're waiting to hear from. By the way, since I submitted my application in, November 15th to my RD school, because like you submitted it early, presumably, here are the things that have been happening to me, since, or here are the leadership activities I've engaged in, etc. So you could even update your regular decision schools. We've already talked about some of these, so, but you have to understand the rules of your deferral, doing what the school says you can do, and you can't do. Send a short update note, keep it short, bullet points. I can't underscore that enough. Visit the college again and maybe attend an info session, but when you're visiting, be respectful. And if you do ask the admissions officer questions afterwards, I wouldn't go up with my parents. I would just go up myself. If there are other people standing around, know that you'll only get a chance to ask a couple of questions, maybe. Again, not why was I deferred, but instead, can you just tell me about the process of how you'll treat deferrals, and anything else that I can do to express my interest in ABC College. You can send an additional letter of recommendation, but I would keep it to one. And then you could also ask your guidance counselor. You could say to your guidance counselor, I'm really upset that I didn't get into XYZ school and I was deferred. would you be willing to make a call for me and advocate for me in that way? Again, be respectful, because that goes, obviously, it goes a long way. You have to understand the data and make sure that, that your, academics are in line with the academics at the school. Craft the update letter, update your other applications possibly. Apply to other RD schools that you like. So don't, don't get caught high and dry. A deferral can become a deny, and a deferral can also become a wait list. Both are frustrating. So have a backup plan. Make sure that you have other RD schools that you like, some that are safeties, so that you are going someplace that you actually like. And consider applying ED2 elsewhere for sure. Okay, so questions?
Yes. Is it typical for a college who deferred then send reminders to submit FAFSA?
I'm sorry, is it typical for a college to,
Who deferred then send reminders to submit the FAFSA?
oh, the FAFSA? So
Yes.
so I see what they're saying. So they're saying, yeah, those offices can be separate. So one may not know what the other is doing. I know that you've seen, all of you have probably seen debacles when, colleges admit the wrong students, or they, they do all kinds of things. So you can't really read in too much to what's happening until you get an admit letter. So I would, whatever financial aid is asking you to do, I would definitely follow up with them, and I would do, what they're asking, or call someone, but you can't read in, you have to, mistakes happen, there are miscommunications all the time. So I wouldn't read into that situation too much. I would try to get clarity. I guess that's really what I'm saying.
Great. And I just put the Facebook link into the Q&A. So if everyone did not get the Facebook link, let me know. It should have gone to everyone, but I just want to check that out. Another question: what's the best way to handle a request for donation from a college deferred, from the college that deferred the student?
Well, that's interesting. So this may be an alum whose child, I'm assuming this, was deferred, and the college is asking for a donation. I'm inferring that. So, and I'm also guessing that the college is big enough such that that could have happened without two offices knowing, right? Whether or not you donate is really up to you. And how, and your experience at the university. I hate to say this, but most donations won't move the needle too much. I'm sure that there are some donations, if you're donating the library, et cetera, that totally moves the needle. But I think that whether or not you donate, that's independent of whether or not your student is going to be admitted to the school after being deferred.
And that's exactly the question that they had. You pegged that. All right. One last another question.
Yep.
Is can I schedule an admissions interview if I've been deferred?
So typically, no. Typically, the answer is that you're not eligible to be interviewed unless they're considering you for admission, and you're going to be reconsidered when they've gotten all of the RD files. So most schools don't interview. They do an alumni interview, but that's rare. Some schools do, but that's rare. So, I hate to say this, but no, it's not something that you, I mean, could you call the school and ask? Yes, but, you know, 9 out of 10 times the answer to a question like that would be no. Almost 10 out of 10 times the answer to a question would be no, but I don't want to break anyone's heart out there.
All right, I think, are interviews even worth it? Most are courtesy interviews.
So, you know, interviews are not they're not in the top 5 things, right? On the NACYAC survey, or they weren't even mentioned in the, you know, what schools think are important. I think it's a way to engage alumni, but I think it's also a way for students who are applying to schools to get to learn more about the school from an alumni perspective. So, so I would interview if you're offered an interview for sure. But most interviews are informational, and I think most colleges make that clear.
All right. No more questions at this time.
All right. Well, I'm providing a coupon code for those of you who want to use Admissions Checkup and want a discount. It's DWL 20 Deferred Waitlisted 2023. And I just wish you all the best. I know this is it's a tough position to be in, you know, but hopefully you will get in after being deferred, and if not, you'll end up in the right place. So thank you all for joining us, and have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you all.